Okay, friends, this is day 14 of our look at the book of Daniel, and we're going to be in Daniel chapter 11 today. Now, as you already know from the reading this week and really beginning last Friday, Daniel takes a hard turn after Daniel chapter 6. Daniel 1 through 6, incredible stories. There's a lot of detail in there that maybe we didn't pick up in the kids' Bibles, but there's a lot of it in there that many of us are already familiar with. 7 through 12 is prophecy that is far more difficult. Lots of imagery, and just a reminder, a part of the reason that prophecy is different, or it's difficult, is because the images that they would have used then to describe certain things are just not familiar to us today. I mean, it would be like if 2,000 years from now you looked at a political cartoon and there were donkeys and elephants in it. People 2,000 years ago or from now aren't going to know what that means necessarily without researching what things were like today, what symbols were like today. So there's a lot of symbolism that's just very hard for us. I'm going to own that Daniel 7 through 12 is not a section of the Bible that I am particularly versed in. It's just not a section that I know all that well. Studying the scripture is the work of a lifetime. There's always more for us to learn, and this is a section that I have a whole lot more to learn about. We're going to look at today, give us just a little bit of a brief overview of chapter 11, and then we are going to look at two sections in particular. Okay, so you're going to see as you read through it, if you haven't read through it already, that the prophecy here really focuses in on the first half around two kings, two nations that are warring with one another. And then you really hone in on, and we're going to look at a second, one particular king. Some people are going to read into this some historical figures and say that Daniel is talking about some things that have already taken place at the time that Daniel was written. Some people are going to say that it's prophecy in the sense of it's predicting things that are going to happen in the future. You know, there's lots of debate around those things. I think what we can't miss here, and what is most important, is that we look at what is the underlying truth here that God is communicating through the author of Daniel. And you can see many of these things, even if there are disagreements about, is this something that happened? Is this something that's going to happen? All of that. So that's what we're going to hone in on today. So I want to highlight three things. The first one is something that hit me pretty hard when I was reading through it, just in general, not in a specific area. And that is the hopelessness that we find when we put our trust in political powers. But just think about that as you read through this. You have these warring nations and these warring kings, and it takes place, you know, on a stage that feels grand, and just, you know, talking about the north and the south and all of this stuff. But yet all of it, that whole stage, it pales in comparison to the glory of who God is, the vantage point that God has. If our hope is in political leaders, political entities, any of that stuff, it's hopeless. It's hopeless. All of this is playing out on a much larger stage than we can even imagine. And that's, you know, God's vantage point, God's stage. So that's one thing that really struck out to me here, is that we got to have our hope in the right place. Okay, a couple passages that I want to look at real quick. One begins in verse 36. Then we're going to back up a little bit. Okay. This is talking about this king who arises, and he arises back in verse 21. In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. So some people are going to look towards this person as being like an antichrist figure, somebody coming in the future. Some people are going to see here Antiochus IV, who was the king of the Seleucian Empire at the time that we think that this was written. Some people think that it's clearly pointing towards him, and that Daniel's lifting him up as like this this evil king. Again, I think what we can definitely take away from it is, what do these evil kings, these evil ruler types, what are they like? What should we be on guard against? All of those things. So this is the description of him in 36. The king shall do as he wills. So he's going to do whatever he wants to. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. So who does he exalt? He doesn't exalt the God of the Hebrews, the true God. He doesn't exalt Yahweh, but he's not exalting other gods either. He's just exalting himself. So who does this evil king, what does he look like? Well, someone who just focuses on himself. Sorry, that truck's going to be gone momentarily. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished. For what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers. So again, it's not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true God that he has no respect for, but the gods of his own nation, of his fathers. He has no heed for them also. Or to the one beloved by women. So don't know exactly what that means, but again, it's pointing towards the fact that he doesn't have respect for any of these gods. Who does he have respect for? Well, he shall not pay attention to any other gods. He shall magnify himself alone. Who does he worship? Only himself. He shall honor the gods of fortress instead of these. The gods of fortress, I think likely what's going on here, again, I have to research it, is that he worships like the gods of like war, of might, right? So is it even a literal God? Probably not. But instead he worships himself, and he relishes in, he loves like the war, violence. A God whom his fathers did not know, he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. So there is some kind of relationship with gods, but again, it's clear that this is someone who puts himself first. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Okay, so there is some kind of being, a foreign god, a mysterious spiritual force here that he is in league with, that allows himself to worship himself also, but he is in league with some kind of foreign power. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. So who is it, like in the world, that he honors and cares for? It's those who honor him. He'll make them rulers of many, and he will divide the land with those who give him honor. So how do you get on this guy's good side? Well, by honoring him. Maybe even perhaps by worshiping him. So what does the prototypical evil ruler look like? One who seems to be worshiping just himself, who has no respect not just for the God, like the true God, but he doesn't have respect for really anything other than himself. But also there's this weird allusion to this foreign God, that he does also seem to have some kind of strange power, some kind of strange backing from a force that we don't understand. Don't quite know what to do with that. But again, bottom line, evil ruler, keep your eye open for people who just seem to focus on themselves. The other passage I want to highlight is the one right before that, beginning in verse 32. Take a look at this. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant. This is talking about the same king. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. So there will be some who will be faithful. They'll stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand. So now we talk about the wise. So there'll be some who remain faithful, who remain wise in the midst of this, and they will help many people understand. So not everybody will bow down to this evil king. Though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. But it doesn't mean that things won't be hard. Many of the wise, they'll stumble. Some of them clearly here, by sword and by flame, will actually be killed. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them with flattery. And some of the wise shall stumble, so they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. So some will stumble, but why will they stumble? They'll stumble so they may be refined, purified, and made pure, made white until the end of time, for it still awaits the appointed time. So underneath the reign and the rule of this evil king, things being as bad as they can possibly be, as bad as we can possibly imagine, this evil person being in charge, having all power, Even in the midst of that, there will be some that are faithful, some that are wise. They will draw other people towards them, teach them the truth. And while it will be the case that they will falter and they will stumble and things will be difficult for them, some will indeed lose their lives, in the end, all things will be made well. Tomorrow we're going to talk about some of the themes in Daniel as a whole. This will be one that comes up. That what you do is you remain faithful in the present, trusting that things will be made well in the end. In chapter 11, with all of this metaphor and all the things that I don't understand, one of the things that comes through loud and clear here is that we should keep our eyes open for folks who only focus on themselves. And we should seek to be people who are, one, wise ourselves, seeing through the lies that are around us. And we should be looking towards those people in this world who live differently, who are grounded in and rooted in the truth. We should be looking towards those people to help us to be able to see more clearly also. Because in the midst of a world that it can be difficult to live in, it is possible to remain faithful. And we have to remember that the reason that we can remain faithful now is because we know that in the end, God makes all things right. That all things will be made well. And not just that. Not just that we're motivated by that, but because of what we believe about Jesus. We believe about his Spirit that is here with us now. We believe that he can actually transform us and change us into people who are able to be faithful even in the midst of tremendously difficult times. People who are to be able to be wise in the midst of all of the deceptions. People who are able to keep our eyes focused on God, to see the truth and to be strengthened. God can do that inside of us, even in the midst of the difficulty. We may not be living in a time that is as extreme as the time that Daniel was written in, but there are certainly ways today in which we are tempted to just be like everybody else. And Daniel reminds us that if we want to be people who make a difference, we have to be willing to be different, and that it's worth it. And that in the midst of that difficult moment and those difficult decisions, that God is faithful. One more chapter, friends. Read chapter 12 for tomorrow, and we'll talk about that then. God bless you.